Hey guys, before we start this episode, I need to say that I'm very sorry for being a few months late to release another Danville discussion episode yet again. That yet another episode is so ridiculously late than I wanted. These apologies mean nothing unless I actually start releasing episodes faster, which I am hoping to intend on doing as soon as possible. We'll see what happens. I usually don't, but there's a first time for everything, supposedly. You know, the old saying goes, better late than never, because I am trying to do this show the way that I want it by talking about just about everything Dwampyverse related, so I will continue doing this show no matter what happens in my life. Don't you worry. Anyways, please enjoy the episode.
And now, our feature presentation.
Hello everybody, and welcome to the Danville Discussion, a podcast about all things related to Phineas and Ferb and beyond. I am your host, Caleb Dirksen, and some of you may know me from my YouTube channel of the same name, the one and only place for some web series related to animation, such as Caleb Reviews. If this is your introduction to this podcast, well, let me tell you about this show. It is a podcast that talks about shows set in the Dan Povenmire and Jeff Swampy Marsh universe, also known as the Dwampyverse, and right now I am talking about each episode of either Phineas and Ferb or Hamster and Gretel, and going through all the cultural or in-universe references, fun facts, gags, and anything else that might come up, and then finally I give the episode in question a roller coaster rating. But on today's episode, I'm instead gonna be going over the latest batch of Chibi Tiny Tales shorts based on Phineas and Ferb, which include Life with Linda, which is also a crossover with Milo Murphy's Law and Hamster and Gretel, Mountain Mayhem, which is a crossover with Space Mountain, Dr. Doofenshmirtz's Balloon-Inator, Super Pet Pals, which is another crossover with Hamster and Gretel, and a last-minute addition, the Chibi Tiny Tales 100th short celebration, Cakeinator. If you want to check out more episodes of the Danville Discussion, then log on to anchor.fm/Caleb-Dirksen, and it'll take you directly to the Danville Discussion website on Spotify for podcasters. Now, before I get started, I should point out one mistake that I've made on this podcast.
Look at this! Every week,
Caleb
makes the same mistake, and I end up getting my neighbor's HS Weekly.
So, I just heard that Snipple Animation Studios is in fact going to be one of the animation production companies working on the new run of Phineas and Ferb alongside Synergy, and I've just been informed that Snipple was the studio that worked on the last third of the Candace Against the Universe movie, while apparently the first third, which has all those overly thick outlines, weird motion tweens, and off-model characters, was done by ERM Productions. So I guess the latter explains why that first third looked rough. It also explains how Snipple's animation for the last third looked nice, and yet their animation for Hamster and Gretel's pilot episode felt very rushed. With that said, I apologize in advance for making that mistake, and I will say, Snipple definitely got back up and improved with their work on Hamster and Gretel's subsequent episodes, so I'm hoping the same thing will happen with Season 5 of Phineas and Ferb. Now, with that aside, let's start with our first short here, which is called Life with Linda. So, Life with Linda was first released on Saturday, January 6, 2024, and in here, Linda is taking a nap until she wakes up after being disturbed by some noise outside, which appears to be Perry fighting Doofenshmirtz. After the title card, Linda waves goodbye to Phineas and Ferb as she's going out to the antique shop, and that's when the brothers decide to build a subterrane to drill underground, yet Candace becomes shocked after seeing this. While Linda is driving through downtown Danville and stops at a red light, we see Milo Murphy running from a wrecking ball which is rolling down his path, and that causes the mirror in Linda's car to come loose, so Linda fixes that until the light turns green and she starts driving again. Just then, Professor Exclamation comes in to destroy the bridge over the lake, but Hamster lifts it up and fixes it with some bandages, while Gretel punches Professor Exclamation out of sight, and Linda safely drives over the bridge, thus making it to the antique shop to open it. As she polishes the stock, Phineas and Ferb are running away from a mummy through portals, only for the mummy to leave behind his pharaoh crown. Linda notices the crown and puts it on display. Back at home, a UFO beams Phineas and Ferb down to the backyard just as Linda comes home after a hard day at work. Of course, Candace is still panicking until Linda comes inside, and Candace tries to expose it to her, but as soon as the brothers and Linda wave hi to each other, Candace becomes stressed, and the short ends with Linda going to bed, only to be a little distracted by another fight between Perry and Doof, but she doesn't care and turns the light off. For some references that I found, the rolling wrecking ball that Milo runs from is just like how it appeared in the opening sequence of Milo Murphy's Law, in which Milo stops walking for a wrecking ball before dodging a falling lamppost. And inside the antique shop, we see Aladdin's magic lamp on a shelf behind Linda. As for my thoughts on the short, not only was it nice seeing characters from all three shows on screen once again, but it was also visually expressive, like when Candace is shocked at what the brothers are doing, or when Milo is scared running from the wrecking ball. Plus, it was nice to have a good little Phineas and Ferb story focused on Linda's life, both within and outside the Flynn-Fletcher residence. As for criticisms with this short, I don't really have much. I would say it's simple for a Chibi short, but that's basically the whole point of these Chibi Tiny Tales shorts in general. They're just simple little Chibi shorts based on Disney franchises, mostly from Disney Channel and Disney Television Animation, so that's not worth any criticism from me. Though they don't really do much with Milo Murphy's Law or Hamster and Gretel, except have Milo run from a rolling wrecking ball, or have Hamster and Gretel fighting Professor Exclamation to save Linda's life when Exclamation destroys the bridge. But overall, I liked this short both as a Phineas and Ferb short and as a crossover. Now, our next short is Space Mountain Mayhem, which first came out on Saturday, January 13th, 2024. In this one, Dr. Doofenshmirtz carves his face on the moon with the lasers on his space shuttle in another attempt to take over the tri-state area until he gets alerted that Agent P is out to stop him, and Phineas and Ferb spot Perry's shuttle in space from their telescope, wondering if that's where Perry disappears to every day. After the title card, Ferb looks through the telescope and spots Super Big Doctor, some more aliens, and the Space Mountain Fortress, which the brothers are amazed at, and they fly into outer space in their shuttle, going to Space Mountain. As expected, Candace spots the boys through the telescope and ends up calling for Linda. Meanwhile, back in space, Doof and Perry are engaging in a space battle, and then, back down on Earth, Candace tries to get Linda to see what Phineas and Ferb are up to, but she ends up spotting a neighbor planting in her garden and doesn't know what Candace is talking about. When Phineas and Ferb reach Space Mountain, they encounter the Ghost Galaxy from that one seasonal variant of the actual Space Mountain, and flee back down to Earth, in which the shuttle finally crash lands in the backyard and disappears before Candace can show it to Linda. At that point, Linda sees Phineas and Ferb just relaxing in a pool made out of the hole that the shuttle crash landed in earlier. Candace feels misunderstood, and the short ends with Perry's laser carving on the moon winking at the camera. Now, going over the references, Super Big Doctor from Candace Against the Universe makes a cameo in this short, and like I mentioned before, the Ghost Galaxy from Space Mountain Ghost Galaxy makes an appearance. That specific seasonal variant lasted every Halloween from 2007 at Hong Kong Disneyland and 2009 at Disneyland in California to 2013, which makes this the Ghost Galaxy's first appearance since 2013. So what did I think of this one? Well, it is another good short, though I'm debating if they did enough with Space Mountain since I've never actually been on that ride, but I did see what it looked like on YouTube, and it looks cool, but it is obvious that it's a roller coaster, and I usually don't ride on real roller coasters that much, especially with the factor of being at super high speed. I assume they've done as much as they could, as they even featured the fortress itself and the Ghost Galaxy. Like, it was nice to see the Ghost Galaxy again after 10 years of disappearance. Even the Chibi animation has some expression, including when Phineas and Ferb's shuttle is speeding up and their faces are squished as it goes really fast, and when Candace is angry, she has 3 red wavy lines over her head, and then it turns into a red gradient head with crescendo and decrescendo symbols when her eyes are squinted, a black trapezoid mouth with sharp white lines, and 5 red wedges over her head. Not to mention the other symbols used over characters for situations such as a question or confusion. However, there is one pet peeve I have with this short, and to clarify, this is not a criticism with the short itself. This is more of what I saw in regards to some of the comments with the short. When Linda looks through the telescope to spy on that neighbor in another garden, who is also female just like her, and her face turned red with a sheepish grin, it completely shocked me when I saw about 90% of the comments section on Twitter filled with the same Madagascar penguins gay meme, speculating that Linda is apparently gay or lesbian. I would like to say 3 things in response. 1, may I remind you all that Linda is already married? She's literally married to Lawrence Fletcher, making him Phineas and Candace's stepdad as well as Ferb's biological dad. 2, you do realize that a red face with a sheepish grin can also mean embarrassment, right? Linda was clearly like, sorry, my bad, when the woman neighbor noticed Linda spying on her with the telescope. And 3, I stopped using Twitter not long after I saw the comments on that clip, so I wanted to memorize the comments as well as possible for this episode. In other words, those comments with the Penguins of Madagascar meme are already stupid, and I don't even know if those of you who left those comments have been watching enough Phineas and Ferb to know what I mean. I'm just saying. And before anyone says anything, I am not trying to sound homophobic. I have a ton of respect for the LGBTQ+ community, and I myself am bisexual. I'm just explaining how some of those people missed the point. But in all, I really enjoyed this short. It was really good. I love every bit of it. I loved the crossover aspects between Phineas and Ferb and Space Mountain. It was great. And our next short that we have is Balloon-Inator, which was released on Saturday, January 20th, 2024. It starts with Dr. Doofenshmirtz hovering over the Danville Zoo and turning a single balloon into a Balloon-Inator, turning various zoo animals as well as a clown and a platypus into balloons. Luckily, Perry is going undercover, hiding behind one of the platypuses to avoid being turned into a balloon himself. After the title card, in which the letters get turned into balloons, Phineas is throwing some pieces of popcorn over Candace's head for Ferb to catch, as Candace is looking at the zoo map and a train comes passing by, on which Perry and Doof are fighting with the Balloon-Inator. Suddenly, one zap ends up turning the train into balloons. Then Doof sneaks into the bird exhibit, only to be attacked by Perry in disguise as a parrot or a hornbill. Next, Doof hides behind an elephant, and just as Perry sneaks up on him, Dr. D zaps Perry's fedora into a balloon, which infuriates the platypus agent to the point that he roars like a lion at the scientist and takes his Balloon-Inator, zapping the lion cage, which causes the lion to pop the cage and chase Doofenshmirtz. At that point, Perry pops the Balloon-Inator on the quills of a porcupine, turning all its victims back to normal, and that's the end of the short. There weren't that many references in this short for me, unfortunately, but I did find at least one. When the clown gets turned into a balloon, I spotted Balloon-y, Dr. Doof's childhood balloon, on the stand. In regards to my perspective on this short, it was really good, and some things that I liked about it include what they did with the title card by having all the letters turned into balloons, and the creative uses of the Chibi animation, like Doofenshmirtz turning a single balloon into a Balloon-Inator, and Perry growing bigger and roaring at Doof before sending the lion after him, which had some high expressiveness for me personally. I even liked that they chose to disguise Perry as one of the wildlife birds and had him trick Doof by immediately attacking him after he passed by him. I'd say it's another great short among this batch. And now for the next short, we have Super Pet Pals, released on Saturday, January 27th, 2024. This one takes place at BattyCon, where we see Dr. Doofenshmirtz, Professor Exclamation, Copycat, and Tina attending a meeting with other villains such as La Cebolla, Derek the Pistachion, Fist Puncher and the Destructress, Mitch, and that one henchman that Tina has, where Doof shows off his new Shrinkinator, shrinking various objects which then get smashed by a burglar and Fist Puncher right before Perry and Hamster show up to stop them, and they're like, "Do I know you?" Because they're looking at each other and they look like they haven't known each other yet. Following the title card, Perry and Hamster begin fighting the villains, and Perry even throws his fedora to cut the vines that have Hamster trapped by Derek, with Hamster chibi punching Derek with his super strength. Then Dr. Doof zaps lasers at Perry, and it seems like Doof destroyed him, but then Perry reveals himself to have super strength and a gold fedora, thus going all Super Saiyan, and he uses those abilities to defeat Exclamation's robots, and then Perry and Hamster finally tie up all the villains with a grappling hook, shrink them down, and imprison them in a hamster ball, and the short ends with them fist bumping each other, but because Hamster is super strong, his fist bump inadvertently hurts Perry's hand. For references, I found a couple cultural ones. I noticed how similar the BattyCon logo is to that of San Diego Comic-Con, plus it could also be a reference to VillainCon from Minions, the first Despicable Me prequel spinoff, and Perry transforms into a Super Saiyan like Goku or Kakarot from the Dragon Ball franchise. Speaking of Dragon Ball, I've been watching some more Dragon Ball Z this year to honor the legendary creator of Dragon Ball, Akira Toriyama, who passed away earlier this year at 68 from an acute subdural hematoma. I was specifically watching the original Ocean English dub rather than the current one by Funimation, mainly because of the nostalgia I have from memes like, "It's over 9,000!
It's over 9,000!
Like, that's never gonna get old. Though I might watch the Funimation dub too, since I have access to Crunchyroll, which I'm currently using to watch One Piece, another great anime. I've even played the Super Dragon Ball Z video game on the PS2, and that's also a lot of fun for me. And now for my thoughts on this short. I have enjoyed a lot of the shorts I've talked about in this episode so far, but honestly, this would have to be one of my favorite ones among this batch, as I loved seeing all these villains from all three shows coming together to stop Perry and Hamster, and we even get some first appearances of chibi versions of some of them, including, of course, from Hamster and Gretel, we have La Cebolla, then there's Fist Puncher and the Destructress, Tina, Copycat, and that burglar who I only remember appearing in the opening titles for Hamster and Gretel, as well as one of the posters. Plus, Mitch from Phineas and Ferb is now in chibi form, and just when I thought Chibi Tiny Tales didn't give enough better treatment to Milo Murphy's Law than the Disney company itself, we now have a chibi version of Derek, the descendant of King Pistachion, who serves as the main villain of the episode, the Phineas and Ferb effect. Even the chibi punch card looked nice, like the actual on-screen words announced by Gretel in the show, and when Perry turned into a Super Saiyan, I felt more than ready to use the over 9,000 meme.
Vegeta, what does the scouter say about his power level?
It's over 9,000!
What, 9,000? There's no way that can be right.
It's just an overall fantastic short, and it proved to me that the dynamic of Perry and Hamster can work just as well as the Perry and Diogi dynamic in Milo. Now, with the last short over here, I originally wanted to do the first 4 shorts as my subjects for this episode, but this one just dropped at the last minute on Saturday, April 13th, 2024, to the point that I had to include this one, and it is not only the 100th episode of Chibi Tiny Tales, but it's also another Phineas and Ferb short, and it's called Cakeinator. So, what's going on in this one is that Dr. Doofenshmirtz has invented the Cakeinator, which can turn anything into a cake, and he starts with his cushion chair, where one of the arms falls off to reveal its cake form, and Doof is amazed at what it just did. The title card then appears, and afterwards, Dr. Doof goes out to the balcony of Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated to zap a fire hydrant that Diogi is sniffing, to which Diogi himself licks the fire hydrant cake. Then it zaps a seesaw that Buford and Baljeet are riding on, and Buford falls off of it as a result of the seesaw becoming a cake, and that causes Baljeet to laugh. And then it zaps the sidewalk where Isabella is playing hopscotch, and that causes her to sink into the sidewalk cake. But then Perry swoops in to stop Doofenshmirtz once again, dodging every zap from the Cakeinator to avoid becoming a cake himself, but his grappling hook gets turned into a cake. Meanwhile, in the backyard, Phineas and Ferb are dancing with the Finadroids and Ferbots from iBrobot, and just as Candace runs off to expose them to Linda, the robots get zapped and turned into cakes, and the real Phineas and Ferb eat them all up before Candace shoves Linda into the backyard. Back at Doofenshmirtz's lair, Perry and Doof continue fighting with the Cakeinator, and Agent P realizes he's standing in front of a mirror and jumps up in the air, where the next zap bounces back towards Doof and turns him into a cake, and so Perry threatens to eat the Doofenshmirtz cake, but he's just kidding and sets the Cakeinator to reverse mode, zapping back from the mirror a couple times to turn his grappling hook and Dr. Doof back to normal. Then Doof takes the Cakeinator, zaps back from the mirror, and turns the machine into cake so that he and Perry can share some bites, and that's the end of this short. There weren't that many references I found in this short besides the in-universe references with that cameo of Diogi from Milo Murphy's Law, or the Finadroids and Ferbots from the iBrobot episode of Phineas and Ferb. When it comes to the latter, this short does not take place in the actual canon of the episode, since in that one, Doofenshmirtz is using a crane with a giant magnet, and when the giant magnet gets hooked onto Santa's sleigh, it magnetizes all the robots and takes them away before Linda sees them, whereas in the short, the robots get turned into cakes, and Phineas and Ferb eat them up. Then again, most of the Phineas and Ferb Chibi Tiny Tales shorts are meant to take place outside the show's canon. But what did I think of this short? What are some things I liked or whatnot? Well, I might as well tie it with Super Pet Pals for my favorite chibi short out of the 5 that I've talked about on this episode for how it fits pretty well for a 100th Chibi Tiny Tales short, since they are celebrating with cake. I loved how cartoony the animation could get, like when Doof builds his Cakeinator, and I'm not gonna lie, Chibi Isabella looked twice as cute as her regular self. Whether it be in her normal clothes for this short, or in her Fireside Girl outfit for the Candace Against the Universe as told by Chibi short, I found her Chibi counterpart twice as adorable, so much so that I even made a fan art with a custom Chibi Tiny Tales counterpart of Isabella as her Galactic Sorceress superhero counterpart that I created, which is on my DeviantArt page. I also love the ending when Perry and Doof both share the cake after the Cakeinator has been zapped. All I can say for final thoughts is that this is a perfect 100th episode of Chibi Tiny Tales. And now finally we're gonna end this off with our roller coaster rating. So now, for Life with Linda, I give that one 8.5 roller coasters patched up by bandages out of 10. I give Space Mountain Mayhem 9 Ghost Galaxy roller coasters out of 10. Then I give Balloon-Inator 9.5 non-balloon roller coasters out of 10. And I give Super Pet Pals 10 Super Saiyan Platypus roller coasters out of 10. And finally, I give Cakeinator 10 delicious roller coaster cakes out of 10, just about every single one even better than the last, with the last two being tied for my favorite, and I recommend checking all of them out if you can. They're all free to watch on the Disney Channel YouTube. And that is all that I'm going to be talking about today, so thank you guys so much for listening to this special episode of the Danville Discussion. As for me, you can find me on my Facebook page at Real Caleb Dirksen, on my Tumblr and TikTok pages at Caleb Dirksen 2 with the number 2 at the end and all in lowercase, on Instagram at Caleb.Dirksen for my main page or at Caleb Flynn-Fletcher for my alternate page, on Threads at Caleb.Dirksen, on DeviantArt at CalebDirksen20, and on Blue Sky at CalebDirksen2.bsky.social. You can also find me on Discord by entering the username Caleb Dirksen, all in one word and all in lowercase. And if you go to the invite link in the description below, it'll also invite you to my Discord server so that you can talk with me about anything, including this podcast or my other content. You can also find me on YouTube, just search for Caleb Dirksen and look for the icon of me as a soldier. And if you want to give the most support for this podcast and get some great rewards, such as getting access to new episodes 2 days early, then please consider joining me at patreon.com/Caleb Dirksen. Special thanks to everyone who has followed or supported me on Patreon, including Kalila Shaw, Sue Friend, Brock Clifton Friend, and my free patrons Gilbert Gann and Alec the Videomaker, as well as Juan Almendarez, Ronnie Whitfield, and Matheson Mullen. It really means a lot to me. As for this podcast, we are available to listen on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, Good Pods, YouTube Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and you can also find us on Spotify for podcasters by using your Apple or Android device or going on the web at anchor.fm/Caleb-Dirksen. It'll take you directly to the Danville Discussion page on Spotify for podcasters. If you've liked what you've been listening to and you'd like to help us get discovered, then please hit that subscribe button on the podcast page. Please rate and review this show with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and please tell your friends about it. Also, if you are watching this on YouTube or listening to this on YouTube Music, then don't forget to press that like button and leave us a little comment with your thoughts on these Chibi Tiny Tales shorts. You can also share your feedback or ask some questions by sending us an email at danvillediscussion@gmail.com with Phineas and Ferb followed by Chibi Tiny Tales in the subject line. Join us next time, and I'm gonna delve into episode 9 of Hamster and Gretel with the Night Marionette and Abuelita's World. Tune in next time for the newest episode of the Danville Discussion with all things related to Phineas and Ferb and beyond. And with that said, thank you guys once again for listening, and until next time, this is Caleb, over and out. This podcast was created strictly and only for entertainment and information purposes. It is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company, Disney Television Animation, or their affiliates. All and any names, images, clips, sounds, or other items related to Phineas and Ferb, Milo Murphy's Law, Hamster and Gretel, and other Disney properties are trademarks and or copyrights of their respective holders. All original content from this podcast is the intellectual property of the Danville Discussion and the host or hosts running the podcast unless otherwise noted.